So these guys all came from Hull, you know, we're going to play a rock and roll band, they like the songs and all that. And I said, yeah, it's great. So, do you want to see what we're going to wear? Oh, yeah, right. Okay. No way. Bloody hell, right, I'm not putting that on. I said, no, believe me, you'll look great. It'll really suit you. Yeah, right. And so I don't know how I did it, but I managed to talk them into doing it. And a couple of nights later, we'd done a couple of shows, and all these girls were all over them. And suddenly the dressing room procedure was really different. It's right. Who's got the blush? Hey, Trevor, have you finished with that mascara?
On the 8th of January 1947, in Brixton, South London, a boy named David Robert Jones was born into a world that had no idea it was welcoming one of the most transformative artists of the 20th century. There were no signs of greatness at birth, no prophecy, no fame, no privilege, just a post-war Britain still recovering from destruction, and a child who would grow up restless, observant, and hungry for something beyond the ordinary. David's father, Haywood Stenton Jones, worked in public relations and had a deep interest in music, cinema, and theater. His mother, Peggy, was lively, imaginative, and emotionally expressive. From an early age, David absorbed culture like oxygen. Music wasn't just background noise in his home, it was a language. Records, radio shows, and conversations about art quietly shaped the way he saw the world. In the early 1950s, the family moved to Bromley, a London suburb.
You'd think that being a famous rock star, married to a supermodel, would be one of the greatest things in the world. It is.
At school, David was not known as a prodigy. He struggled with focus, bored easily, and felt disconnected from rigid structures. What did capture him was creativity, drawing, acting, and especially music. Everything changed the moment he heard Elvis Presley. That voice, that attitude, that sense of rebellion cracked something open inside him. From then on, music wasn't a hobby. It was an escape route. By 1961, at the age of 14, David received a saxophone. It became his first true musical identity. He practiced obsessively, fascinated by jazz and rhythm and blues. That same year, however, a violent incident at school left a permanent mark. During a fight with his friend George Underwood, David was punched in the eye. The injury caused his left pupil to remain permanently dilated. What many would see as a flaw later became one of his most striking visual trademarks. Between 1962 and 1965, David drifted through London's underground music scene. He joined several bands, the Conrads, the King Bees, the Manish Boys, constantly chasing a breakthrough that never came. He copied styles, adapted trends, and tried to fit into scenes that never fully accepted him. Record labels showed mild interest, then disappeared. Success remained out of reach. Another problem emerged: his name. David Jones was already taken most notably by Davy Jones of the Monkees. Needing a new identity, he chose the name David Bowie, inspired by the Bowie knife. The name symbolized sharpness, danger, and reinvention. It was the first conscious step toward self-creation. In 1967, Bowie released his debut album, David Bowie. It failed commercially and critically. The music sounded confused, unfocused, and out of sync with the cultural moment. For many artists, this would have been the end. For Bowie, it was a signal that he needed to go deeper, not outward. He turned to theater, mime, and performance art, studying under Lindsay Kemp. He learned that identity itself could be constructed, destroyed, and rebuilt. Music alone was no longer enough. It had to be combined with character, movement, and myth. By 1969, Bowie stood at a crossroads, still obscure, still searching, but finally ready. The world was looking toward space, the moon, and the future. And Bowie was about to send a message from the edge of Earth that would change everything. In July 1969, as the world watched Apollo 11 approach the moon, a strange, melancholic song drifted through British radio. Space Oddity was not a celebration of technology or victory. It was quiet, lonely, and unsettling. Its astronaut, Major Tom, wasn't a hero. He was lost, detached, and slowly disappearing into the void. The song felt alien, and that was exactly why it worked. Space Oddity became David Bowie's first real success. It reached the UK top 5, and finally put his name in public consciousness. But fame arrived with a problem Bowie would face repeatedly throughout his career. People expected him to repeat himself. Instead, he immediately began pulling in the opposite direction. In 1970, Bowie released The Man Who Sold the World. The album shocked listeners. Gone was the soft acoustic space ballad sound. In its place came heavy guitars, dark lyrics, and themes of insanity, identity fractures, and control. The album artwork alone caused controversy. Bowie appeared in a dress, reclining, unapologetically challenging gender norms at a time when that kind of imagery was still dangerous. Commercially, the album underperformed. Artistically, it was a warning. Bowie was not here to be comfortable. Around this time, his mental state grew increasingly unstable. He was reading obsessively Nietzsche, Aleister Crowley, science fiction, and occult philosophy. He spoke openly about feeling disconnected from reality, as if he were observing himself from outside his body. This sense of detachment would later fuel his greatest creations, but in the moment it was terrifying. In 1971, Bowie released Hunky Dory, an album that quietly redefined his future. Unlike his previous records, this one was melodic, emotional, and deeply personal. Songs like Changes, Life on Mars, and Oh, You Pretty Things explored fame, identity, youth, and the feeling of being out of sync with the world. Critics finally started to understand him. The public followed more slowly, but something had shifted. More importantly, Bowie had a revelation. Music alone wasn't enough to express what he felt. He needed a vessel, a character, someone who could say and do things David Bowie couldn't. Someone who could burn brightly and be destroyed without killing the man behind him. By late 1971, Bowie began shaping that idea. He imagined a bisexual alien rock star sent to Earth as a warning of humanity's collapse. The character would be loud, sexual, dangerous, and temporary. Bowie didn't just want to perform songs, he wanted to become someone else entirely. This was the moment before the explosion. The calm before one of the most radical transformations in popular music history. Bowie was done searching for who he was. In 1972, David Bowie stopped trying to explain himself and instead became someone else. That someone was Ziggy Stardust, an androgynous alien rock star sent to Earth during its final 5 years before apocalypse. Ziggy wasn't just a character, he was a weapon. And Bowie wielded him with precision. The album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, was released in June 1972. Musically, it fused hard rock, glam, and theatrical storytelling. Culturally, it detonated. Ziggy was loud, sexual, ambiguous, arrogant, fragile, and magnetic. He rejected traditional masculinity and openly embraced bisexuality at a time when such openness could end careers. Instead, it launched one. Bowie didn't just sing Ziggy's songs, he lived as Ziggy. On stage, he moved like a creature from another planet. His flaming red hair, skin-tight jumpsuits, platform boots, and exaggerated gestures shattered every rock performance rule. During a now legendary appearance on Top of the Pops in July 1972, Bowie draped his arm around guitarist Mick Ronson. Millions of British households watched in stunned silence. Rock music would never be the same. Fame arrived fast and violently. Bowie became a cultural lightning rod. Some worshipped him, others feared him. Parents complained, critics argued. Teenagers felt seen for the first time. Ziggy Stardust wasn't just entertainment, he was permission. Permission to be different. To reject fixed identities. To exist outside the lines. But there was a cost. Bowie began losing control of the character. Fans screamed for Ziggy, not David Bowie. Interviews blurred into performance. Drugs, especially cocaine, entered the picture, amplifying paranoia and emotional instability. Bowie later admitted that he was barely sleeping, barely eating, and slowly dissolving into the persona he had created. By 1973, Ziggy was too big to contain. Bowie understood something crucial. If he didn't kill Ziggy, Ziggy would kill him. On the 3rd of July 1973, at the Hammersmith Odeon in London, Bowie took the stage for what fans believed was just another concert. Near the end of the show, he leaned into the microphone and calmly announced, "This is not only the last show of the tour, but the last show that we'll ever do." The audience was devastated. The band was stunned. Ziggy Stardust was dead. The decision was brutal and necessary. Bowie walked away at the height of fame, abandoning the very character that made him a global star. It was an act of artistic violence rarely seen in pop culture. But Bowie was already moving forward. He always was. After killing Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie did not slow down. He fractured again. Between 1974 and 1976, he entered one of the most dangerous periods of his life, artistically bold, commercially powerful, and personally catastrophic. This was the era where creation and self-destruction ran side by side. In 1974, Bowie released Diamond Dogs, a dystopian album inspired by George Orwell's 1984. The record painted a decaying future full of surveillance, hunger, and chaos. The accompanying tour was theatrical to the extreme, massive sets, dramatic lighting, and apocalyptic imagery. But behind the scenes, Bowie was unraveling. His cocaine use escalated rapidly, especially after relocating to Los Angeles, a city that would nearly consume him. By 1975, Bowie pivoted again, this time toward American soul and funk. Young Americans shocked fans who expected glam rock. Instead, they got smooth grooves, black musical influences, and lyrics obsessed with identity and disillusionment. The album produced his first U.S. #1 hit, Fame. Ironically, the song mocked celebrity culture even as it crowned him a star in America. But success masked collapse. Bowie later admitted he barely remembered making large portions of his next album. By 1976, he had become the Thin White Duke, a cold, skeletal figure dressed in black and white, emotionally detached, aristocratic, and dangerous. The album Station to Station was born from this state. It was haunting, mechanical, spiritual, and deeply unsettling. Many consider it one of his greatest works. Bowie himself remembered almost nothing about recording it. During this period, his mental health was in free fall. He survived on milk, peppers, and cocaine. He became obsessed with occult ideas, fascist imagery, and paranoia. Some of his comments in interviews caused controversy and alarm. Later, he would openly admit he was not mentally present, he was surviving, not living. Bowie understood he was close to death. In 1976, he made a decision that likely saved his life. He fled Los Angeles. He moved to Berlin, West Germany, seeking anonymity, discipline, and distance from the chaos. There, he worked with Brian Eno and producer Tony Visconti, stripping his music down to its bones. The result was the Berlin Trilogy, beginning with Low in 1977. The album rejected commercial expectations, entirely fragmented songs, instrumental tracks, and emotional isolation. Many critics hated it at first. Time would prove them wrong. Berlin marked the beginning of recovery. Bowie reduced his drug intake, rebuilt routines, and learned how to be human again quietly, without spectacle. For the first time in years, he was no longer trying to burn himself alive for art. He wasn't healed yet, but he had stepped back from the edge. Part 5 will close the story from rebirth and reinvention to Bowie's final act, Farewell, and the way he turned death itself into art. By the late 1970s, David Bowie had survived what should have destroyed him. Berlin gave him space, discipline, and distance from excess. With Heroes released in 1977 and Lodger in 1979, Bowie completed his rebirth not as a character, but as a fully conscious artist in control of his direction. He no longer needed personas to hide behind. Reinvention had become instinct. The 1980s brought global superstardom. In 1983, Let's Dance turned Bowie into a pop icon on an entirely new scale. MTV embraced him, stadiums filled. Songs like Modern Love and China Girl dominated the charts. Financially, it was his most successful era. Artistically, it was safer. Bowie later admitted he traded experimentation for reach, and he knew exactly what he was doing. But Bowie never stayed comfortable for long. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, he deliberately stepped away from mainstream expectations. He formed the band Tin Machine, embracing raw, noisy rock that confused fans and critics alike. Commercially risky, yes. Artistically honest, absolutely. Bowie was once again burning bridges on purpose. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Bowie continued evolving. He explored industrial music, drum and bass, electronic textures, and visual art. Albums like Outside 1995 and Heathen 2002 reflected a mature artist obsessed with mortality, isolation, and the nature of being human in a fractured world. He also turned to acting, leaving his mark in film and theater while carefully protecting his private life. In 2004, after a heart attack during a tour, Bowie quietly stepped back from the spotlight. For nearly a decade, he disappeared. No interviews, no tours, no explanations. Many assumed he was done. They were wrong. On his 66th birthday, the 8th of January 2013, Bowie released the next day without warning. The album confronted aging, memory, and legacy head-on. The message was clear: he was still here and still watching everything. But Bowie was already preparing his final act. On the 8th of January 2016, Bowie released Black Star. 2 days later, on the 10th of January 2016, David Bowie died from liver cancer at the age of 69. The world was stunned. Only then did listeners realize the truth. Black Star was a farewell. The videos, lyrics, and symbolism were a carefully constructed goodbye. Bowie had turned death itself into performance art. He controlled the ending the same way he controlled his life on his terms. David Bowie didn't just change music, he changed permission. Permission to evolve, to contradict yourself, to kill old versions of who you were and become something new, over and over again. And now, before we close this story, thank you for reading this journey from beginning to end. If this story gave you value, insight, or inspiration, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, support it, and come back for more stories that go deeper than headlines and surface-level myths.